and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two segments. The first, of course, is the Punjab by-elections, in which PTI has emerged victorious according to the unofficial results that have come out so far. We know that PTI has won 15 seats, PMLN has managed to bag 4, and an independent candidate has gained one particular seat, which of course means that the stronghold that Punjab was considered of the PMLN for ages now seems to have lost its control at the Punjab Assembly and in fact the province as well. This of course is now going to move forward in terms of the elections of CM Punjab, and then of course the way the political scenario may or may not shift as well. We know of course that the entire situation was created after the defection of earlier PTI leaders regarding the CM Punjab elections, and then after that these seats fell vacant, and this is how the by-polls got conducted, and the PTI has emerged victorious with 15 seats in hand according to unofficial results. This is the same PTI whose leadership has been ousted earlier this year, and we have seen that the leadership, including the former Prime Minister, has talked about a conspiracy and important government again and again, and he's put forward this narrative which seems to have been sold, and this is something that the voters have opted for. So we're going to try and discuss what this means, not just for the PTI and the PMLN, but of course the future of Pakistan as well, the future of the Punjab Assembly, and then whether or not the country is going to move towards general elections, the kind of impact this political scenario is going to have on the political and economic situation of the country. This is going to be the focus of our first segment today. The second is going to take a review of the US President Joe Biden's visit to the Middle East, including Israel and Saudi Arabia as well. There have been a lot of talks with regards to what really came out of this particular visit, whether or not this was a positive visit in terms of the way that the world has perceived the meeting between the Crown Prince and Joe Biden as well, especially the fist bump, which has also been under discussion a lot, and there has been varying views regarding what that means or how it's going to be perceived internationally as well. So we're going to take a look at that and then also discuss how moving forward the US wants to engage with the Middle East, what sort of plans that it has, and how this particular visit is going to impact on actual deliverables such as the energy supply as well. So that is going to be our second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, I've been joined in the studios by Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we'll soon be joined by our guests online as well. But I'll start with you, Farrukh. When we look at what had happened yesterday with regards to, of course, the victory by the PTI gaining 15 seats, do you think that this was a surprising victory?
Right. I would have rather that you started with Raja Saab.
I know.
But let me now talk about the overall situation. Look, on the face of it, there is no surprise. These 20 seats actually belong to PTI, right? And still they were vacated by people who went to the other side, and then there was election. You could have said that they are going to come back to PTI, but that was not the atmospherics. On one side, we see that the numbers have enhanced, particularly PTI's support in each constituency has increased many folds, right? The second thing is that PMLN, while it lost most of the seats, in terms of numbers or turnout, it wasn't far behind. So that is something that needs to actually be looked at as well. I wouldn't call it a big surprise, but I would say that Punjab has a tendency of voting for the incumbent government in the by-polls, and that didn't happen. So that means that PTI has won. Congratulations to two individuals are really in order. The first one is to Imran Khan Sahab, who is the head of the party that pulled this surprise victory. Then Maryam Nawaz also needs to be congratulated because yesterday she accepted the result with open heart. But regarding who actually lost, I think this noise box of pundits that you call television actually lost, because there are so many people who have been misguiding the government and the ruling party or ruling alliance. And they have been, if you see how they were behaving yesterday, the moment results actually started appearing, all of a sudden they started recalibrating their response, and they started behaving in a very eerie fashion, that now they wanted to divide the party that is ruling or the coalition that was ruling, and they wanted to actually ensure that their political careerism actually continues. regarding what went wrong or what went right in these bypolls, I think the first thing was of candidates. And this PMLN has already taken on board the people whom you have been fighting for many years. Now those people were actually contesting from your ticket. Your own voter was not ready to vote for them. This was the first thing. The second was, of course, the atmospherics because of inflation, because of the power outages, because of circumstances, there was going to be a reaction. And finally, the way the previous government was removed, there must be some kind of reaction to that as well. I think PTI tapped in on some sentiment that was quite evident. And that's why they were returned with so much power.
All right. Let me also welcome in the debate Ibrahim Khan, who's the leader PTI, and Ahmed Javad, leader PMLN. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us on the debate. We have been joined by Ibrahim Khan on telephone line. I'll start with you, Mr. Ibrahim. Congratulations, first of all. And secondly, when we take a look at the PTI's victory in these bypolls, of course, there are these particular seats and the immediate consequence, of course, of the kind of shift in power dynamics in the Punjab Assembly as well. But in a much larger sense, especially since we look at the political situation of the country since March and since the no confidence motion against Imran Khan, and up till now the political scenario that has evolved, and then of course moving forward as well in terms of the general elections and who will probably be in power for long, what sort of impact do you think these particular seats in the provincial assembly is going to have on the overall aspect of PTI and its position in Pakistan?
I think the narrative that the PMLN and PDM had taken during their protests while they weren't in power, they were all talking about inflation and price hike, and it's becoming really hard for the poor person, a common Pakistani. But when they came in power, the price hike and the inflation went manifold. So their whole narrative was taken as a bluff. And number two, the issue was that they only came into power because they wanted to amend the NAP laws. They wanted to amend the overseas Pakistani vote and the legislation we had done for the Pakistani overseas, because now they're contributing around $31 billion a year for Pakistan, but they're not allowed to vote. And thirdly, it was this EVM issue, that they knew that after the EVM there will be very small chances of any kind of rigging in the polling process. So I think that with the combination of all these things, that all became very evident in front of the people of Pakistan, that why they were in and how they tried to manage things, and the way things were handled at the Sindh House, and then the way things unfolded, and courts were open like at midnight, and all of that. I mean, people of Pakistan have rejected, and they want to see the real democracy, regardless whoever wins. Yeah. And that should be basically, the prime priority should be Pakistan, and not political party or individuals who are basically two families trying. They actually are running the political atmosphere of Pakistan.
Of course. Let me also go to Mr. Ahmed Javad and try and understand what his perspective is with regards to where the PMLN may have gone wrong and why this particular defeat actually happened. Of course, there have been statements coming out how the difficult decisions taken with regards to the economic situation were also a factor. But when we talk about the inflation and the kind of economic situation that exists, do you think this is something that the decisions taken by the government have caused in terms of the sentiment that the voter feels? Or do you think that the kind of blame or situation that existed with regards to the PTI when it was in power sort of just shifted onto you guys?
First of all, I would like to mention few good things about yesterday's election. First of all, It was free and fair elections. There were no question marks on this election. And the propaganda of Mr. X and Mr. Y by Mr. Imran Niazi and his PTI leadership, that there is one Mr. X and Mr. Y who are trying to tamper with the election or doing the rigging, pre-poll rigging or whatever they are planning. So I think it's high time that Imran Niazi and PTI leadership may like to apologize from Mr. X and Y, because we don't know who are those Mr. X and Ys, but I'm sure they know that who are the X and Y. Secondly, there was a lot of allegations on Election Commission of Pakistan, and after yesterday's elections, I think PTI should apologize from Election Commission of Pakistan for their allegations. And if they still persist to put allegations on the Election Commission, they will take the unique status in the history of Pakistan politics, where a political party, when loses the election, put allegation on the Election Commission, and the same political party, even if it win the elections, they put allegations on the Election Commission. So that's a unique status which PTI might get in the history of Pakistan. Now, another good aspect of yesterday's elections is Maryam Nawaz openly accepted the defeat and accepted the victory of Imran Khan. Now, just imagine if it was the opposite results. What was the situation today? What was the situation on the roads? I think there would have been chaos in the country, and Mr. Imran Niazi would have been calling for dharna or jalsa or long march and protest, and in the talk shows their leadership would have been fighting. So just see the difference, that a party, for them it was a big surprise. They lost it, yet they accepted the defeat. They accepted the victory of PTI. Something good, a good tradition in Pakistan, which obviously Imran Khan can never follow in the past, but maybe in the future he can follow this tradition set by Maryam Nawaz. Then about the reasons that why PMLN lost the election, in my humble opinion, perception today is the most important thing. If a political party, after 3.5 years of worst performance, still manages to draw the attention of public, not towards its worst performance, but towards imaginary, hypothetical regime change and imported government and external conspiracy. So I think that perception has prevailed. But at the same time, and you should also remember that in Pakistan, anti-America slogan is a very popular slogan, and this has been used in the past, and this has been used again.
Ahmed Javed Sahab, if we look at the candidates of PMLN, obviously within PMLN now, few of the leaders, they claim that the candidates, they were not suitable for this election, and I think PMLN would have gone for their traditional candidates, because their traditional candidates, if they would have been contesting this election, it would have been easier for PMLN to win it.
I agree with you, because the traditional candidates are constituency candidates of a political party. They carry a bond with their workers and with their voters in that area. You cannot just change it just because that some candidates have joined you. Now you change them, but where will you bring that bond which is essential for the election day, for the campaign? The workers are looking forward their own bond, their own association. And I think that was the missing point, and it was kind of a helpless situation for PMLN, because they perhaps had to accommodate those people who have joined them, but I think they had to pay a very big cost. So secondly, very important, I think I would say that a lot of people are, I mean, it's our national character that we try to create hype out of everything. And today PTI and their pro PTI media analysts and anchors, they are calling it game is over for PMLN. I think they are badly mistaken.
Yeah, Ibrahim Khan Sahab, if we check the trend of voting in Pakistan, of course, normally what it used to happen, that fair enough, women used to come out for votes, obviously in Punjab as well in past, but this time around the number of women that came out for voting, it was in a very large number, number one. And number two, if you talk about the by-elections, the trend is that normally they never used to cross 30% of the turnout, but this time around it was in between 45 to 50%. Would you, would you comment on this, that the important factor that played the key role in these elections for PTI is there are two things. Number one, turnout was good. Number two, women voters, they came out.
And Ibrahim Saab, when we look at the situation, of course, currently we understand that the PTI had put in the allegations of pre-poll rigging as well, and there was a lot of ruckus with regards to whether or not these elections are going to be fair or not. And now that you've won, of course, do you still stand by that stance? Because there have been statements coming in that despite rigging, the PTI has won. If that is the case, how do you really see these elections? Can they be called free and fair? And how is that going to impact PTI's performance in these elections?
Ibrahim Khan Sahab.
The honorable participants from the PMLN, that he was claiming that since they weren't able to grant tickets to their own people, and that's why there was a detachment of association from those people to the party. I would just remind them of election by-election in 2014, I guess. It was in Jalalpur Pirwala. One of these guys called Qasim Noon, he was, he again left one party and joined PMLN. At the same time, all the PMLN leadership was told to follow him and support him, and he won the election. So I think this is just a lame excuse for losing elections. Now, coming to the point that Mariam accepted it, with all due respect for the lady, she's a convict, okay? I don't foresee a reason mentioning her, and even seeing in Pakistan the only instance where a convict, a 7 years in prison conviction is leading a major Pakistan's party, and she is being accepted by all, and whereas a lot of women in jail are in jail for very, small crimes, and they're still, serving their sentence. And anyways, but coming back to the polling issue, I totally think that there were two major efforts that ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan made. That his campaign across Punjab was really very vibrant and with the logic, and he told the people what has happened to Pakistan, and they need to come out. It's not just his responsibility; it's all of the Pakistanis that we all are responsible if we don't come out and cast our vote. And I think women in particular, and also they took his this stance and very seriously. Resultantly, yes, there was
Ibrahim Saab, I'm glad that you mentioned Khan Saab earlier as well. Imran Khan Saab's today's talk actually demanded the resignation of Chief Election Commissioner. Now this seems to be quite an intriguing development, because yesterday you actually swept in Punjab, and one would have thought that you actually are ready to repose trust in the system. But let me ask you, even if the current or incumbent Chief Election Commissioner resigns and there's a new one, what assurance is there that you are going to accept them as the credible CEC, because the incumbent one was appointed by your party?
Okay. first going back to the turnout, why the turnout was so much. We still have suspicion that there was around 10 to 15,000 votes balloted irregularly, or you might call them rigged. That's why the number of people participating in the elections has come up so high, like up to 50%. Is the apprehension, or in many cases we have seen those people. One of the Iowans on TV, admitting that he has casted 600 votes in favor of the MLN candidates. And there was one instance in Multan where they were casting votes in a private factory, and where Shah Mahmood Qureshi had to go and protest. So it's a combination of things with regards to the Chief Election Commissioner. Yes, he he's no more enjoys the trust of at least Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, and we want someone neutral who's
All
that
right.
can be negotiated
All right, and
with the
we'll
people.
talk more
Yes.
about what plans, of course, the PTI has now moving forward after this victory. But before that, Farrukh, I also want to talk about when we see these bypolls and the results, and this this competition between different political parties and gaining more seats, and of course, gaining control of the provincial assembly as well. There's all of that, of course. But beyond that, we are, of course, facing political challenges. We're facing serious economic challenges. And somehow that seems to be not really part of any particular campaigns that we've seen in the bypolls as well. There hasn't been a real solution or way forward that has been discussed, and that doesn't even seem to be the basis of which the decisions have been made by the voters as well. Does this mean that the political parties have really not been held accountable in terms of performances? Because earlier the PMLN was saying that because people aren't out in the streets, they understand that difficult decisions had to be made and they're not really upset about it. But that doesn't seem to be the case, because what they're really thinking about is perhaps the fact that they need to be more independent and not under the influence of any external power.
Right. Sanat, this is a great question. Remember that when you talk about ideological aspects, one thing that is quite significant is, pulverizing of TLP. We haven't seen TLP pulling any major success in the whole process. That actually speaks to something else, the irrelevance of ideology in politics. It is PTI's success. It can actually present it the way they want. But in the history of this country, religious aspects, international policy or foreign policy have never been any reason to create a government. People have won based on what the common man is feeling, and that continues repeatedly. The second factor is some kind of shock to the system. Fall of East Pakistan was one, right? Similarly, Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto's assassination was one. That kind of emotive issues might actually create some kind of situation where a government can be swept into power, but ideology is not a concern. I think at this moment what people are going through because of the economic situation, you can say that PTI might be responsible for what is going on. You can say that PMLN is, but politics doesn't have long memory. People realize what is happening now and who's ruling, right? In that situation, it is usually thought that the government or party that is in power is going to face the brunt, take the brunt, and that is what happened. One more thing that Raja Saab keeps on mentioning, and I have to actually point to a book that we used to read, Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. I think Raja Saab somehow wants to imply that somehow men are supporting PMLN and women are supporting PTI. With due respect, I think that most of the families vote in the same pattern. If you are aligning with one party, the entire family will vote for that. So that is what happened.
Even there are families, within families there was divide. Obviously few of the family members, they voted for PMLN, and the others, they voted for PTI.
How would you know that?
from social media, I've been obviously watching it, and
that is not an effective sample, right? You need big data to actually
because
analyze
people were.
But allow me,
people
actually, I
claiming-
have a question for Jawad Saab. Ahmed Jawad Saab, now that the results are before us, and we have to see that the government is going to be formed in Punjab, PTI has said that it is going to form government, and they have identified the same candidate as well. I've come after watching many debates on television where PMLN people were saying that Mian Nawaz Sharif should come back to the country, and that assemblies should be dissolved immediately, and fresh elections should be called. What is your party's strategy going to be in coming days?
I think there should be no knee-jerk reaction to yesterday's election. Yes, there should be an immediate deliberation, consultation among the top leadership, and immediate election is not the solution. And still, I think there is a lot to do. A lot can be done before the next elections. And if PMLN can work on its selection of candidates, can work on its perception, narrative building, can work on governance, the time they have, work on the economy. We must recall that in January 2022, almost 6-7 months before, PTI was considered zero, and after 6 months, we are seeing a different situation. So the political situations, they do change. And in my opinion, yesterday's results are basically, it is the result of a kind of people's reaction to the perception which very successfully Imran Khan and his team created over past 3-4 months, and that was the external interference, that was regime change and the imported government. So it is the success of that perception. For the perception, I say a few words that it's not important what is truth. Important is what people can be made to believe, and that is a perception.
Jawad Saab, sorry to cut you, but since you are mentioning this perception that might have actually led to election results, do you recall any other election in the past where such perceptions actually resulted in some kind of victory for some party?
There could be many incidents. The perception always carry a main role, but the only difference perhaps in today's time is that the perception is now not on a conventional vehicle. Perception today is on a vehicle which runs with lightning speed, or which has extraordinary outreach. This was not possible yesterday. So obviously the role of perception has grown bigger thousands of times what we could have seen in the past. So in my opinion, today, the best example is that imagine a political party who had a terrible 3.5 years economic performance. They could not fulfill their promises of accountability. They could not fulfill their promises of justice or
all right,
change,
Ahmed Saab, I want to talk a little bit more about perception and reality, and I want to understand, Faisal, when we have spoken about, of course, these allegations that have been made by the PTA in the past as well, we have spoken about how they have been denied by the US, they have been denied by the armed institutions, they have been denied by the incumbent government, and of course, this has been put forward repeatedly. And yet, we have seen that the PTS leadership has not backed away from claiming that this is what is indeed the truth. And whether or not it is, of course, when we're talking about perception, that it means that the voter has believed it to be true and has been swayed by that perception and voted, right? So does this mean that when we talk about the way that the truth was tried to be put forward, or how different institutions tried to say that this is actually what happened, hasn't really come down to the masses? Is this a sort of a failure or something that actually lacks in the way that we put forward what really is the information to our general public? Because it seems to be that irrespective of whether or not it's true, the political party who put forward a narrative has won seats in the Provincial Assembly.
Sana, if we talk about the mode of communication, obviously in past, the mode of communication between voter and the leader it was very slow. But in today's times, of course, it is very vibrant in shape of social media we have, and we know that former Prime Minister Imran Khan and today's PTI leader, he was very actively utilizing all of the platforms available to him. He utilized Facebook, he utilized Twitter Spaces, he utilized YouTubes, and even all other platforms he was available with. He has been utilizing them, and he made sure that his narratives are being sold. As soon as they were coming in the market, they were being sold very quickly. And to me, I think his followers, they bought everything. Whatever he was saying, they bought everything. But if we talk about the narratives for the election, remember, when they started talking about this narrative, I remember me and Farrukh bhai, we always used to talk about it, that in past, we never had any precedent in which the foreign policy as a narrative got sold in Pakistan.
Or even religion.
Yeah, or even religion as well. But this is the very first time, the precedent has been set by PTI, though in by-elections and general elections, they're still to come. But for now, they have sold it and people have bought it. So times have changed. For now, here Sana, I wanted to suggest to all of the political parties, including the sitting government as well, that the sort of polarization in the society we're seeing right now, and including obviously PTI as well, right now, they have to create a sort of, even if it is a backdoor communication with each other, they have to do it. Even if we, even during the war times, during the battles, the commanders, what commanders do is, they generate sort of messaging to each other. If the army generals or army commanders can create during the battles in the war, then why not?
Very quickly.
Yeah, we get your point. Yes.
Very quickly, I just wanted to rebut this idea. This is what I'm very humbly pointing out. If it was about ideology, TLP perhaps would have performed really well. Some of the most underdeveloped areas in Punjab actually voted this time. Laiya, Lodhran, Dera Ghazi Khan, they are parts of Dera Ghazi Khan division where you cannot even get clean drinking water. In those places, do you think that all this connectivity can reach? Or for that matter, it is an issue where people can be bothered about any foreign conspiracy? I'm sorry, I think it was basically inflation and then bad candidates that actually affected their judgment, and they punished whosoever was in power.
All right. Ibrahim Saab, when we take a look at the next steps forward, of course, there has been talk of free and fair elections, and this has been something that the PTI's leadership has been asking for, and now they're, of course, also reiterating that, saying that that's the only solution forward. What sort of strategies are going to be employed by the PTI in this regard? Are you even vying the dissolution of the Provincial Assembly for this particular objective of getting general elections as soon as possible?
Actually, Prime Minister Imran Khan has already called a meeting of the committee, which basically is our decision-making or a thought process or kind of a committee organization which basically sits down and looks at the different options, like the way how the strategy has to be developed and which way one has to go. But at the same time, we are very clear, and even before this elections, we have been saying we're ready to sit down with you with the condition that the general elections should be called in. And then we can sit and discuss, and things can be, resolved with the, acceptance of all parties. And on the other hand, this concept of which was really bugging me a little bit was this conspiracy theory. There is no conspiracy. It is simply blatant interference, which was re-ratified by our National Supreme Council. I mean, just try to confuse that, I mean, word with this conspiracy. Conspiracy is something of planning of or connivance or whatever, which is if it materializes or not, it's one thing. But if things have materialized, that is a blatant interference, and this was admitted. And that's why the demarche was sent to the American embassy. So let's not mix up the two and try to create a chaos or try to create a misunderstanding about whether it was a conspiracy or not.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Ibrahim Khan, and Mr. Ahmed Jawaz has already left the show at the moment, but thank you very much for being a part of the debate and the discussion, of course, regarding our first segment. That's unfortunately all we have time for that, because we're short on time for our next segment, which is taking a look at the US President Joe Biden's visit to the Middle East, including Israel and Saudi Arabia as well. Faisal, when we look at the overall 4-day visit, of course, to the Middle East as well, this has been an important visit by the Biden administration. But exactly what has the Biden administration really gained out of this?
If we talk about what they have gained obviously
or lost
within Israel. While they were visiting Israel, of course, they have gained. And we know that whatever the ruling party in America, the presidential candidates, they always tend to look towards the lobbies, and we know that Israel plays a key role in all of the elections, because they are considered as very important for the lobbyists. So this was quite important for them as bilateral relations. Of course, they have been, they have a long-standing relationship, both of the countries, and it keeps on strengthening. But if we look at, his visit to Saudi Arabia, Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia, it has attracted, from within America, there was a lot of criticism. Obviously, Khashoggi case, it gets highlighted everywhere, and of course there were interviews as well of the foreign minister, of the environment minister as well, if I'm not wrong, and them interviews. Of course, Saudi Arabia, they have cleared their position and the position of MBS as well, so it is not being discussed anymore, number one. And number two, President Biden asked for increase in the oil production, which MBS denied, and he simply said no to it. Reason being that if we talk about today's Saudi Arabia's oil production already is the largest in the world, and they are the largest oil producing country, and that's why they have said that any decision of increasing this, it would be coming from OPEC plus. It's all up to them. If they can tell us to do it, we will do it, otherwise we won't. And if we take another example, last week it was Saudi Arabia has decided to increase their imports, the oil imports from Russia, which it is another question mark on President Biden's visit, and that too is, the largest oil producing country of the world itself is importing oil from Russia. And if we look at all of these things, the only thing that comes out for Biden, that as soon as he faces his people in his country, he will be criticized.
Right, he's already being criticized, of course. Farrukh, when we look at, of course, that particular image of fist bump that has been circulated and how it's been perceived, it's obviously it's proving to be quite costly for Joe Biden. But there have been other perceptions circulating as well that it's not really account for a warming of relations. How exactly do you think this particular image is going to then translate, manifest the way in which this particular visit is going to be perceived, especially at home? And then afterwards, of course, when Biden spoke about how they need to be able to engage with the Middle East and Saudi Arabia as well, not really leave any vacuum for countries like Russia, China, or Iran. What exactly do you think that is going to factor in terms of the way people are perceiving his particular visit and his relationship with the Crown Prince?
Yeah, by people you mean the Western media, right?
Yes, and the people at home in the US
yeah,
as
but
well.
we don't have any opinion polls
Sure.
of late, right? So it is basically media. So the Western media at this moment is bipolar. It is also has a split personality,
Yeah.
and it keeps on saying things where it keeps on actually going through rituals where they will protest, but in the end they will reward because they think that certain good things are being done. I give you a couple of examples, but before that, let me talk about the missed opportunity. Remember that as our friend Raja Sahab actually pointed out, that the main purpose was to increase the production capacity or production actually of oil so that the cost can come down. So frankly, this OPEC plus was, I think, misdirection. Basically, the reason cited is that Saudi Arabia is already producing up to the capacity, right? So beyond that 16 million somehow, beyond that they cannot at this moment, they don't have the capacity. The second very important aspect is that there's always a possibility that all oil producing countries can get together, come together, and then they can create a lot of economic crisis. We saw that President Trump actually played Russia and Saudi Arabia against each other. That's why the cost actually really went down, and that was quite intriguing at that time. At this moment, the purpose was also to create some kind of schism where Saudi Arabia doesn't gets latched on to Russian foreign policy. That was also there. But I would say that the overall situation is such that so-called Abrahamic Accords and the kind of global order it is creating, I think President Biden has been able to tap into that.
Okay.
He went to Israel, where it was quite an effective visit. Then he went to the Arab countries, for Saudi Arabia, UAE also. There too, it seems that because they are now very close, he might have created a situation where in coming elections, because all these parties, all these countries have foreign policy influence as well. And they even have, because they are rich countries, they have influence within America. There is a book on this, Proof of Conspiracy, Seth Abrahamson's book, that how they can actually affect the elections. I think in the end, President Biden during the midterms will be rewarded. But in the short term, I think the oil costs will not come down.
All right. That's all we have from the debate with regards to, of course, the polls in Punjab and the US administration's visit to the Middle East. There's much that remains to be seen both at home and internationally as well. And for that, keep watching the debate.